Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tavern Adjacent. Thank you so much for joining me on another solo pod. I think we're going to have a guest next week. Can't guarantee. Stuff could happen, but I am hopeful. Guest soon. But anyway, today, with just me on the set, we are going to be talking about a couple interesting topics. Number one, we're going to be talking about why I don't really buy all that many Dungeons & Dragons books. And as a D&D content creator and somebody who DMs a lot, that might be surprising to you. But yeah, I spend very, very little on D&D books these days. I only own 5, 4 of which were gifts. This is the only one I bought, and I bought it for review purposes. I want to talk about why that is, and why D&D books just really aren't in my wheelhouse. And then after that, we're going to be talking about Session 0, kind of connecting back to our last episode where we talked about the battle over Session 0. We're going to be talking about how you can have an awesome Session 0 to start off your D&D campaign right. And then we're going to be talking about my D&D campaign with Campaign Diary, yet another really good session, one that I am really proud of, and one that I thought would be rough initially because of how last minute I prepped it, but some really strong visual elements, kept my players engaged, and I was really happy with how it turned out. And then, of course, as always, we'll end off with Thing of the Week. So yeah, very standard episode, but I think we've got some interesting topics. I hope you guys enjoy. Without further ado, let's get started. Man, this Wrath of the Machine Destiny 1 gameplay circa 2016 is really bringing me back. But anyway, nostalgia aside, why don't I buy a lot of D&D books? Well, there are a few reasons as to that. My primary reason is I homebrew a lot. I like writing my own stories. So something like this. I think Call of the Netherdeep, I read through it because I was going to review it. I read through it, and I think this is a really strong adventure. I've heard really great things about it from you guys. When I said that I was going to review this book, a lot of you guys expressed, like, I really, really enjoyed it. And I can see why. Matt Mercer and his team and the people who helped him with the book, I'm assuming maybe WotC was involved, I don't really know, but whoever wrote this book, Matt Mercer, his team, his co, they did a good job. So why didn't I run this adventure? Well, because even though I really like this adventure, running pre-written adventures is not what allured me to Dungeons & Dragons. I like creating stories along with my friends, stories in worlds with characters that I made. Like creating NPCs, for example. I love creating NPCs. I could spend hours just like organizing tokens of my NPCs all together and like organizing a little wiki. I have a Google Docs page called Characters of Isselheim being the location of my current D&D campaign, House of Devils, which you'll hear about at the end of the episode. But yeah, I have this whole Google Doc of essentially a character wiki that, I'm not exactly publishing. It's just for me and my 5 players, but I put a lot of time and effort into it because I like it. It's fun. Like, I like writing that stuff. I wouldn't exactly call myself a great author or anything. The opposite, in fact. It's quite derivative work. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's for me and my friends, right? And that is what that's what drew me to D&D, is the ability to create stories with my friends. And even though with something like this, you can still create awesome stories with your friends, I don't know. It's not all me, it's not, the setup wasn't me, the characters and the NPCs aren't me, the villain wasn't made by me, the world, all that. Like, the allure of creativity is what brought me to the game. And by the way, this is not me trying to drag modules. I think a lot of people, when they talk about, like, I don't buy D&D books, there's this sense of elitism to it, and that's not what this is about. This isn't me trying to say, like, oh, I'm so much better than you. Look at me being all frugal, not buying D&D books or cluttering my house. Oh, I'm so wonderful. No, this isn't what that's about. Okay, come on, no. That is crap. If you want to buy books, I'm not going to stop you. My home, I'm out of Lego space. My birthday's coming up, by the way, and I'm not buying, but somebody, I requested if they wanted to buy me a present, and they acquiesced. They're buying me a new piece of furniture, a dresser. I don't need a dresser. I don't have any clothes, but do you know what I do have? I have a big Lego set that I'm going to put on top of the dresser. The only reason I'm getting that dresser is to put a Lego set on it. That's how cluttered my home is with Lego. So I'm not about to judge anyone for buying D&D books. I spend, thousands upon thousands of dollars on plastic building toys. So, no judgment is going to come from me. And I don't think you should judge anyone for, how they spend their money as long as they're being reasonable about it. I enjoy Lego. That's why I spend money on it. And if you enjoy running modules or you want to own core source books, I'm not going to stop you. I just want to offer a bit of a different perspective because I see a lot of people saying like, oh, you need the DM's guide. You need the player's handbook. And I would argue you really, really don't. Like, seriously, you really don't. And the primary reason beyond just like, oh, I homebrew a lot, the other reason is a lack of necessity. I don't think D&D books are fully necessary. If you want to play D&D without owning a single book, I guarantee you could do it. I ran D&D for years before my family bought me those books because, they knew I was into D&D and they wanted to get me something for Christmas. And I wasn't exactly living in the house at that time to correct them. So they bought me 4 D&D books. And you know what? That was really, really generous of them. Have I used Tasha's Cauldron of Everything or Xanathar's Guide or the DM's Guide ever? No. I haven't used a single one of those books. I haven't. And the reason is because the information that's contained within is freely available on the internet. And this isn't like a 2020 pandemic thing. Like, D&D resources have been available on the internet for forever, for a very long time now, as long as I can remember. When I started D&D, I started as a player. I wasn't a dungeon master at the time. Sorry, a moth just flew in my face. And I was like, oh God, that scared me. But I started as a player. And obviously as a player, I could have my DM send me resources, but he wasn't sending me pictures of the book. He was sending me, PDFs. He was sending me Word documents. That's what he was sending me. I didn't need any books to make my first character to join his Roll20 game. Now, of course, that was a super casual experience. That wasn't exactly like a long campaign. It was a one-shot or short campaigns and whatnot. I've talked about that, briefly. But, even when I got fully into Dungeons & Dragons, years later, after I watched Critical Role Campaign 1, I wanted to be a dungeon master because I realized, hey, I think I can do something really cool with this. I watched Matt Mercer tell this amazing story with his friends, alongside his friends, building this narrative together. And I thought to myself, I really want to do that. I didn't need a single book. I never used a DM's guide. I never used a player's handbook. And maybe to some of you, that's insane. And of course, different people learn different ways. But I never needed to learn with the books. And I think the pressure to learn with the books was unnecessary. I think that I am a pretty good dungeon master. Am I perfect? No. Am I great? I don't think so either. But I think that for my friends, I'm a really strong DM. And I never used anything like this or any sort of, bump the mic, sorry, any sort of core rulebook. Now, could they be helpful? Yes. Are they 100% necessary? No, they're not. If you want to start D&D, putting out 20, 40, 60, whatever, how many, I don't know how much the DM's guide and the player's handbook cost. Last time I checked, there were 20 bucks, but might changed. But I don't think you need to drop however much money is necessary to buy the player's handbook and the DM's guide if you don't want to. The resources to learn those skills are online. And arguably, I would say if you don't learn well from reading big textbooks, which I don't, I am not the kind of person who can learn from textbooks. I'm terrible at it. I'm the kind of guy who learns. Reading is just, this might come as a surprise to some of you considering I read Reddit stuff, but reading is not really my strong suit. I actually struggle a lot with reading. I'm not dyslexic or anything. I just have a skill issue, really. I'll be honest about that. I don't have a lot of practice. I like doing 2 things at once, and reading requires your full attention. So it's just not something I usually engage in. So yeah, when I'm trying to read the DM's guide, I often just, I feel like I'm wasting my time because I'm not doing 2 things, and I lose focus on the other things I gotta do, and then I get distracted, and then boom, I'm not reading the DM's guide anymore, am I? That's why I preferred to learn from podcasts or learn from online guides. And again, this is how I learned. It's not how everyone's gonna learn. But I want to make it clear that if you don't want to, you can't learn from the DM's guide, the player's handbook, Tasha's, whatever, that's okay. It's okay to not buy D&D books, to learn in a different way. Again, this is the only one I bought. And I don't think my DMing career would be any different if I had never bought and read this book. I would be the same dungeon master. I mean, obviously, I can't peek into other timelines. I'm not that clairvoyant, but I'm pretty sure my DMing career wouldn't have changed. Now, I will say this. There are D&D books that I will live and die by. Oh, actually, just one D&D book I will live and die by. Flee Mortals by Matt Colville. That's it. That's the only one. And there are reasons why. I think the reason why Flee Mortals by Matt Colville is a book I will live and die by is because it's much more niche. I can't find the stat blocks for Flee Mortals freely available online for easy access, right? Like, to get the materials contained in that book, I have to buy it. It's not like the DM's guide where you can look up the information, just have it. Flee Mortals is not like that. And also, Flee Mortals has a lot of homebrew mechanics that, just came out. They just came out now, so they're not exactly like, popularized in the D&D space. Stuff like minion rules aren't going to pop up in Critical Role anytime soon. So that's why Flee Mortals is really valuable. There is information that is exclusive in that book. But I find that is rarely the case with official and even some, in fact, many third-party materials. In fact, the third-party thing actually brings me to my next point. Beyond just necessity, a lack of desire. I said earlier that I'm a homebrew guy. I like writing stories. That's why I don't do, adventure modules. But what about stuff like Kobold Press's, Tome of Foes? The reason why I don't buy Kobold Press's Tome of Foes or Volo's Guide to Monsters, books that could be used in a lot of campaigns, the reason why I don't buy those is because, again, there's just a lack of desire. The design philosophies of those books do not line up for what I want for my campaign. Flee Mortals does. And I don't really buy books on a whim. I don't just get stuff because that might be cool. Because, again, if it's not 100% necessary for my game, I would honestly rather make it myself most of the time. I have never impulse bought D&D materials. I've impulse bought Lego sets. Trust me, I just built one, so I know for a fact I've done that. But D&D, even if it is a big part of my career, it's not something that I will just snap purchase because I'll go through this whole thing of, am I actually going to use this ever? If I get a Lego set and I build it, I know that thing is going to be displayed for a very long time. But a D&D book, yeah, it's probably only going to be used for display purposes because, if it's a monster manual, I'm probably going to just stick to my own homebrew materials or go to Flee Mortals. If it's, an official core rulebook, I'll probably find the materials online. So why would I get this? It's both desire and necessity. Most of the time, both are lacking. So, yeah, with this discussion, I wanted to clear up why I'm not going to be discussing latest releases. I know I saw a lot of videos about the Giants book. Not my thing. Someone was talking about how the lore is really cool, and if you get the new D&D Giants book, there's a lot of cool lore in there. But again, might be cool for reference. But if I want to take inspiration from lore, there's so many universes beyond D&D that I take inspiration from. Where's the necessity and where's the demand for me, right? And that is why, again, you won't see me talking about those latest releases. It just doesn't pique my interest. So, there you go. I just want to just open up to you guys about why, you'll probably see the same 5 books over and over and over and over and over again until I get a physical copy of Flee Mortals. Then you'll see that a lot. But yeah, the only D&D book I've ever loved truly is Flee Mortals because, again, it has the exclusivity. Can't find information everywhere like a lot of other books. It's something that I actively wanted, a more action-oriented system for monsters with rules that weren't popularly available and haven't been popularized in D&D media yet, and I hope that they will be soon because I want more people to hear about this. And on top of that, it was a need. My game was lacking for intense combats, and this filled that niche. So yeah, all of those factors combined make Flee Mortals into my favorite D&D book, whereas something like the DM's Guide or the Monster Manual, God forbid, would be less up my alley. Now, I want to say this again. If you love buying books for whatever TTRPG you play, I think that's awesome. But if you are more on the fence, especially if you're just starting out, don't worry about buying a ton of books. You don't need to buy all the core source books and read them through cover to cover in order to be a good dungeon master. I didn't. Now, would they have helped? Probably, yeah, but would my journey have been all that different? I don't think so. I think I'd still be in the same place I am now if I had the DM's Guide years earlier. maybe I wouldn't have made as many mistakes, and maybe I would have used different magic items in the campaign, but at the end of the day, I still have the skills that I have. I just learned them in a different way, and that's okay. Everyone learns differently. Reading big textbooks isn't the only way. So whether you're hesitant because of necessity, desire, or what have you, maybe you just have a different learning scheme, I think that's all right. I think it's okay not to fill your shelves with D&D books. And I think it's okay to not fill your shelves with D&D books and still call yourself a D&D enthusiast. Still call yourself someone who loves this game. Because, yeah, I don't really spend all that much money on D&D. And I still adore this game because at the end of the day, D&D's this. D&D is the friends you make along the way, literally. D&D is the fun I have with my group. We don't need to buy books or anything like that. The session 0 that we had in person, the first time we've ever done that as a group, because we always do session 0 as one-on-one, when we pulled out the player's handbook, that was awesome. It was fun to actually use it for once. It was the first time we'd ever done that. But I mean, the player's handbook isn't what made that experience awesome. What made that experience awesome was the fact that I was with my friends, laughing and drinking and having a good time, and occasionally working on our characters. That's what made it fun. D&D isn't the books. It's this, and it's this. As cheesy as that sounds, it's true. So yeah, there you go. That's my perspective on D&D books. Give me your perspective. Are you a book hoarder? Do you buy all the tomes right as they release? Not just D&D, like any sort of TTRPG. If you play Vampire the Masquerade, how many books do you have? Are you stockpiling them up, or are you way more of a minimalist, sticking to the stuff you find online and the materials you make yourself? I want to know what kind of audience I have. And I don't want to see y'all going down there and saying oh, I do this, and that's why I'm better than you. None of that, all right? Everyone's got their own preference, and that's okay. Whether you buy lots of books or you don't buy any at all, all right? I don't want to see any of that nonsense. If you do that nonsense, you're banned for life. So anyway, aside from that, let's talk about Session 0. We just brought it up a little bit, and I want to talk about what makes a good Session 0, because it's been an ongoing discussion. I think it's finally time we address it. So without further ado, next segment. All right, Session 0. Session 0 is a delicate art. Not really. Session 0 is just a conversation. At the end of the day, that's what Session 0 is. In fact, arguably, it's what all of D&D is, but, conversations can be difficult to have. What should this conversation be about? Well, at a baseline, you want to establish what the campaign's going to be about, what characters are going to be in the campaign, and expectations for how the group is going to conduct themselves. The last one being the one that I think a lot of people talk about. Like when we talk about Session 0, we're talking about, content warnings, stuff like that. That's the kind of material we often talk about on horror stories, because on horror stories, we're talking about things going wrong, often from a person-to-person standpoint, and that's where that third thing is going to really come into play. Maybe some people would be exposed early if you tell people, hey, this is the kind of content that is okay at the game. Can you tell me what kind of content wouldn't be okay with you? It might help people to get that stuff out earlier so you can avoid any sort of mistakes in the game itself. However, I want to focus first on the character and the world stuff, because during my third D&D campaign, I finally had an in-person Session 0 with my entire party. Well, one guy, he showed up early, and then he had to bounce because he had lunch with his girlfriend at the time. It was a whole thing. But, point is, I had everyone at my place for a Session 0. Usually, here's what I do. I call them up, and we talk about the campaign and their character, and then I hang up, and that's it. Sometimes we'll Discord. We'll get on Discord FaceTime or whatever, and then we'll make characters together on D&D Beyond. Sometimes we do that. But this time was really different, because this time we were playing in my Tales from the Tavern homebrew system. That's what I was making it for. I was making it for this campaign, and because it's a homebrew system, a homebrew rewrite, I didn't want to leave anything up to chance with my players making their characters using these materials. I wanted everything to be as clear as day, and as the person who wrote this crap, I wanted to be there to answer any questions or fix any mistakes that I inevitably made. So yeah, that's why I decided to have this in-person Session 0. It was originally for practicality, but it ended up being so much fun. First and foremost, it was just great to sit down and really just talk to everyone about what the campaign was going to be, give them the general premise, answer their questions about the world. How everyone together had this sort of energy in the room. It was almost like a it was strangely almost like a classroom, I guess, where, everyone's encouraged to ask questions that they have about the world that I'm creating for this game. It wasn't really a world, it was a continent. The world's already made. It's just I was putting them on a new continent, so it's not really a new world, but the point is I was answering questions about this continent and helping them figure out how to fit their characters into it. It was helpful too because with Tales from the Tavern, backgrounds are a big part and factions are a big part of character creation. And obviously in factions, in backgrounds, there is lore, and my players were asking me about lore materials from those elements of their characters. So it was really great to be there to answer those questions. Having an in-person session 0, having a group session 0, I think can be a lot of fun. People sometimes frame it as like, what are we going to do the whole time? It's going to be so boring. Like, I don't know, talk to your friends. Like, I'm sorry if I come off as dismissive, but if you're having a session 0 with like an established group, I don't understand why doing something would be a struggle. Like, me and my friends don't need something to like stimulate us in order to spend time together. Like, to spend time with my friends, we just sit on the couch and, talk because we're friends. We don't need like something to keep us entertained like a bunch of petulant children. So obviously, if you are different, everyone's different. Everyone hangs out with their friends different. If obviously you might be different, but to me, it's always been crazy whenever someone tells me like session 0, it must be so boring. Not really. When like I have a group together, I mean, that was so much fun. And when I'm doing it one-on-one, I think that's also a practical way to do it. Like, I think that's the more practical way to do it. When I got my friends together for that group session 0, it was awesome to talk about the story of the campaign and establish the world and everything, but I'm going to be real. A lot of that time was spent just messing around and talking, which is fine, by the way, because, like I said, we're friends. However, objectively speaking, having a session 0 one-on-one was much more efficient. I can get that thing done in like 20 minutes. We have a character made. We have everything established. It's perfect, right? Speaking of characters, I think character creation is where both have their strengths and their weaknesses. Character creation with the group all there is really, really fun. Now, a big weakness is I do like some surprise when it comes to revealing the rest of the party. It's almost oracular. That's a word I got from Matt Colville. Oracular. It's really fun to see people react to what the other party members are playing. It was one of my favorite parts of Shadow of Carconos. It was really cool to have that captured on camera, to have the players' reactions to each other's characters captured on film. It was really neat. And it made sense. Their characters were meeting each other for the very first time. They've never met. Of course they'd be reacting this way. So it made sense in the story, and it was a lot of fun out of game. Having a group session 0, though, I think is really great if you have a story where the players already know each other, where the characters already know each other, and you want to collaborate on what you want to do with your stories. It was really neat to have Ulrich, this honorable paladin, have a history with the barbarian mercenary Shanks. It was really cool to establish that between them, and to establish maybe some kind of mysterious connection between the vampiric soulsworn who lost her memories and the warlock who has a mysterious patron. It was neat, establishing those connections, figuring out how player characters can, relate to each other, interact with each other early before the campaign even starts. I think that's really, really cool. It was cool, and it made our first session all the stronger because now my players aren't really just like coming up with it on the fly. That's not what they're comfortable with. When they have a little bit, just not too much, but just a little bit of foresight, it gives them much more time and much more, I suppose, mental resources to improve their roleplay. My players aren't experienced role players, but this has been the strongest campaign when it comes to roleplay by far. Maybe it's because we have a new inclusion to the group. Maybe he has something to do with it, but I think that having a session 0 where we get to really establish our characters together as a group really, really helped. Now again, one-on-one phone calls, also good. In my first campaign in Shadow of Carconos, this is what I did. And it worked out fine. It worked out just fine. I think that both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses. I think there's a camaraderie that's lost when you're just doing a one-on-one call, but also, when I was talking to Jacob from Crow's Perch about his character Masao Takeda, I mean, we were on the phone for like 2 hours. Like, you can get kind of lost in it. But I do like getting lost in it with the whole group there. It's just personal preference, I suppose, right? But yeah, there you go. When it comes to, what kind of content you need to talk about when it comes to the group dynamic, I think this is also really important. There are a lot of resources online if you want to look them up. I can't cover everything, but my essential question is this: what are you not comfortable with? And this is not something you ask in a group setting. In terms of session zeros, this isn't really something I have during the actual session itself. I don't even usually do this during the phone call. I usually just text people like, hey, text me back what you are uncomfortable with. The reason I do that is because I'm not putting them on the spot. Whether it be in the group dynamic or just with me, I don't want to make someone feel like they need to answer like right now. Not everyone knows off the top of their head like, oh yeah, what am I not comfortable with? Like, I would need to think about it for a little bit to actually like get all of that out. So, having it be in a text is much, much easier because, now I've got time to like consider what I want to write down. That is, in my opinion, the best way to do it. And if they say nothing, that's not good enough for me. Like, I need you to say, there's no particular content that I want to avoid in the game. I want you to say that directly to me because, better safe than sorry. Now, in terms of content that I, as the Dungeon Master, am not comfortable with, I have a Discord channel for that. There's like a little like safety tools Discord where you can just see the kind of content that's in the game, that I know is in the game, and the content that I specifically don't want to experience in the game, and it's nothing that would be absurd. Like, stuff that's in the game, gore. Gore is in the game. I describe gore all the time, and if you're not cool with that, sorry, don't know what to tell you. Material like that is definitely going to be there, and I can't write down every sensitive topic that's going to be in the game. Hence why I ask people directly, like, what are you not comfortable with, so we can figure that out. I also include, obviously, the things that I am not comfortable with as a person. Like, I don't know why the players would do this, but like, I got a thing with water, so just don't describe like drowning. Like, characters might drown, but I'm not going to get like super into describing how the water enters your... No, it's not my thing. There's other content I'm not going to talk about, but the point is that, yeah, I have that in there. So not just for the players, but also for me. It's also for you as a dungeon master. Like, even though you are the arbiter of this universe, hey, there might be stuff you're not cool with, and that's okay. There's plenty of stories about, DMs making players uncomfortable, but there's also stories about players making DMs uncomfortable. It's 100% possible. So both need to be kept in mind. You make sure that everyone is having a good time in your games, and no one feels like they have to, bow out because of content that doesn't make them feel okay. But session zero, again, isn't just about that. We often focus on that last bit, but it's also about creating the characters, establishing the world, and also just talking with your friends, man. Like, I think session zero shouldn't just be surgical. It should be a time for you to hang out with people. Spend time with the people that you're going to be with for hours and hours per week. Like, here's my honest opinion. If you can't have small talk with your D&D group, major red flag for me. Huge. Like, if I don't feel like I can just talk to you about what went down that day, I don't think this D&D campaign is going to work out in the long term. I just don't imagine it. If I can't just talk to you in a human-to-human experience, how am I supposed to role play a character, a fantasy character with you, or build a world around something that you made as a player? How am I as the dungeon master supposed to work with you if we can't even just have a casual conversation? Like, that's a big red flag for me. In fact, it's not just a big red flag for me for Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot of aspects in my life where I'm just like, small talk's part of it. Like, I remember I used to be a musician. I used to be okay. Now I suck. But I used to be, under average. And I had a private teacher. He was a professor, and he was very talented. He is extremely talented. We still talk every now and then. But a big part of why I think our student-teacher relationship was so comfortable was because I could talk to that guy. Like, it's not like we spent most of our time talking. We have to play the instrument. But we did chat. We could text each other. We could, just talk. And that felt good. It made me more comfortable around him, and it helped me to learn more. I genuinely believe that the fact that we could have small talk was what proved that our student-teacher relationship could work. And obviously, that's not a relationship you're going to have with your players. It's not student-teacher, whether you be a player or a DM. But that presence of small talk shows that I'm comfortable around you. And if it's not there, I don't know if this is going to work out. Like, recently, that's been my litmus test for joining D&D groups. If we can't chat about just what happened in the day, don't think it's going to work out long term. And if a session 0 is so uncomfortable for you because you think you're going to be bored the whole time, you're just not going to talk to anyone, it's just going to be boring and lame, having people just sit around, make characters. And I don't know, man. Like, if I can't talk to the group while we're making characters, like, if we can't just, like, chat, I don't know if this group's going to be for me, long term. But yeah, that's just my opinion. What's your opinion? This is obviously a very subjective thing. Like, do you think lack of small talk is a red flag for you? How do you do session 0s? Do you prefer the one-on-one call or the group thing? In person, online? How does it work in your game? Like, seriously, even as an online DM, I love doing the in-person session 0. It was awesome. But yeah, we've talked enough about the session 0 for my D&D campaign, and session 0 is hopefully for your D&D campaigns as well. It's time to actually talk about a campaign itself. We just had a really good first dungeon crawl, and I think that I got some cool lessons to teach you guys about doing a proper dungeon crawl in your D&D game. So, without further ado, let's move on to the campaign diary. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Cozy Set. Today we're back for campaign diary. Sorry, I'm wearing a different top than in the last segment. I'm recording this on a different day because I want to go to sleep. So I'm recording this on the next day. But despite that, I'm ready to talk about my 5th D&D session, and I'm ready to give you guys my little guide to dungeons. So dungeons are something that are made way easier for me thanks to my virtual tabletop. Through VTTs, I can make walls, doors, etc. My players can explore dungeons like they're in a video game, and I think it's really cool. That fog of war effect is really strong for giving players a sense of mystery and suspense, like something is lurking around every corner. That is what, in my opinion, a dungeon should strive for. That suspense, that idea of who knows what's coming next. Now, you can also do this without a virtual tabletop. You can also do this with physical game pieces, though in my opinion, it is more difficult much of the time because, especially if you don't have a lot of illustration, it can be hard to create that suspense without any sort of visual for your players to hook onto. However, I think that another big thing that helps a dungeon to be really, really suspenseful is some good ambiance. Whether or not you're playing on a VTT or you're playing in person, I think ambiance and music, those are so strong for getting your players really immersed into what's going on. Like, seriously, I've talked about this before, but I cannot play D&D without music. If there's just silence in the game, it's so awkward for me, especially in the dungeon. I think this really helps to actually make the game feel scary, feel suspenseful. But anyway, we're going to talk about more dungeon lessons in a moment. Let me talk about the session itself. So, Session 5, if you guys want a recap of House of Devils, essentially our heroes, the Snow Striders, are taking a cursed sword across the entirety of the continent. Lord of the Rings, One Ring of Power style. And on their journey, they have arrived at the Ivory Sanctuary, a gargantuan fortress in the snows that is under attack by gnolls. In the last session, they were told by a defector from the gnolls that the gnolls have allied themselves with some dubious pirates, some disingenuous pirates, and the party may be able to sway the pirates to their side if they give the pirates a great treasure. The party have no hope of defeating the gnolls without any sort of support, so they are going to endeavor to find some kind of great treasure to bribe the pirates over to their side. Now, problem is, they don't have any great treasure, but luckily, I hooked on to a little thing my players did in the last session. Now, I'm not going to lie. I didn't plan for this to be the origin point for the quest to find this treasure. I thought that an NPC would tell them, like, oh, we're picking up some kind of weird magic beneath the sanctuary. Because, spoiler alert, beneath this ancient stronghold, there's some ancient treasure. Who could have thunk it? But, of course, my party don't know that. So I needed something to communicate the idea to them. I thought it was going to be an NPC, but I realized in the last session, one of the party members found a map. They decided to pick up a map very last minute from a battlefield, and I decided to use this as the quest hook instead. I think this is a really cool way to make it feel like your players are constantly shifting the world. Adjust your pre-established plans to fit into what they're doing, even if it's seemingly something small. Like, seriously, when my player brought up, like, oh, guys, I have that map. What if it leads to some kind of treasure? That was the moment when I was like, oh, that's a much better hook instead, because it feels like that had an effect. Even if I didn't plan it out, The players don't know that. You know, it's behind the screen. It feels like they've got some big effect by doing something small, and I think that's really cool. So yeah, the map that they found, it happened to lead beneath the fortress where they found some sort of cavern that was hidden beneath the mortar and the brick. And in that cavern, they quickly saw a bunch of bodies, mummified bodies. Now, I got this idea squarely from Chepeku's maps. I know, full disclosure, they haven't sponsored this episode, but they are a sponsor of the show in general, the channel. They're not sponsoring this, and I would say this whether or not they were sponsoring me, because I literally use their maps all the time. But I think maps in D&D are a really strong way to get a quest hook going. Like, originally, I was going to have this treasure be some kind of ancient mechanical device that is going to foreshadow some threats my party will fight if they delve into the depths of the Underdark. Basically, there are all of these different regions, and each of them have different threats for them to contend with. Think of it like Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom with all the regional phenomena. Here, though, I want to foreshadow a little bit, you know, as if the party were getting hints of what's to come. And this device was to foreshadow the precursors, an ancient machine army that are buried underneath the depths of the earth, that were researched by a fallen dwarven empire long eradicated. You know, ancient history stuff that's, in my opinion, pretty cool for my players to explore. Here's the thing, though. As I was looking at this map, I noticed that there are mummified bodies in the visuals. And, you know, I could just tell my players, oh, that's not canon, that's not part of the game, blah, 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 blah. But I was thinking, no, let's integrate that. Maybe the reason this device is down here is because somebody, some kind of rogue mage has been experimenting on it. And maybe the reason the mummified bodies are here is because the mage has been using them in some kind of wicked experiment to use this precursor device for his own ends. And who knows, maybe this mage could be some kind of bump the lantern, sorry about that. Maybe this mage could be some kind of antagonist for the future. Just looking at that map gave me so many new ideas. And it also allowed for a little bit of environmental storytelling. As the party were finding these bodies, which turned out to be bodies of a homebrew creature called the Siyokoi, named after a Filipino monster. They're basically frog people in my world. They're my world's frog people, mandatory frog people. Everyone needs a frog person in their campaign, come on. But yeah, turns out that this mage has been kidnapping, like, dozens, at this point 50 plus, Siyokoi from their village and is using them in experiments. And of course the Siyokoi are pissed. By this point, he's long gone. The party have no idea where he is. But the Siyokoi have invaded the cavern to take revenge. And of course they don't really know what's going on. They don't have any insight into like the politicking of the exterior world outside of the depths. So they think that the sanctuary is responsible, meaning that these Siyokoi are something that needs to be resolved somehow. Now of course the party could talk to them and try to explain things, but this is not the way. Besides, the Siyokoi did come out swinging, to be fair, and so the party did kill them. The party did kill them, though they quickly realized that they are a much more sympathetic force than they originally envisioned. Again, all of this is environmental storytelling. As the party were exploring this map from Chepeku, they were seeing these mummified bodies. They were seeing these devices all around. They were realizing, like, oh, someone has been down here, like, experimenting. And during the battle, I realized that there's this neat little crevice in the map that could be some kind of secret passageway. I took advantage of that to give my party a secret passageway to explore through, and then through that, they eventually found the device in question. And, dude, when they turned the corner and their little tokens went across, I mean, obviously, it's a D&D map at the end of the day in Foundry VTT. I've got some lighting effects and cool SFX in there, but at the end of the day, it's nothing, like, mind-boggling in terms of visuals. But still, when my party turned that corner and saw this strange foreign device pulsing with blue magic, they freaked out. They were like, whoa, what is that? Because at this point, the campaign has been fairly low technology, so seeing this almost futuristic device in this lab, really cool. And also, the Chepeku lab, it has a lot of Easter eggs all over the place. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't have anything planned for those items in the lab. There was a gas mask. There was one of the mummified bodies had a smiley face drawn on him. There was this strange staff of magic. And the party was, their tokens were running around, checking out every individual corner, asking me, like, what's this? What's this? What's this? What does this do? I mean, they spent like 20 plus minutes just running around that lab. And of course, there's this big dome of energy around the device itself. And they were actually moving their tokens to avoid it because they were so terrified of what would happen if they got close to it. Now, I will say, when in situations like this, it is hard to just make stuff up, but I'm actually pretty happy with what happened. I managed to come up with reasonable explanations for everything in the room. You know, of course, stuff like, why is there a corpse with a smiley face on it? Who knows? And sometimes leaving it up to party interpretation is okay. Stuff like the magic staff, I allowed the party to roll a check to determine what the staff is. Stuff like the gas mask, those are more mundane, but stuff like, you know, what's up with this creepy mummified body with a smiley face on it, I left that for the party to just think about, come up with possibilities themselves. Like, let people interpret your story, especially for small things like that. It gives your world a little bit of color. Now, throughout this dungeon, of course, in dungeons there are combats, and I haven't talked about this yet, but been mostly talking about the story element of a dungeon, the ambiance of a dungeon, but what about the combat of a dungeon? My dungeon combats are pretty simple, you know, very much like your classic World of Warcraft dungeon. There's an encounter, and then there's an encounter, and then there's an encounter. Obviously, in World of Warcraft, there are trash mobs in between each encounter. I don't do that because time. There's not enough time for trash. And frankly, like, who likes fighting trash, man? In D&D, I mean, who likes... I don't like fighting trash. I put trash in front of my players. You know, if you're unaware, trash are like throwaway mobs to add a little bit more, you know, depth to a fight. Like, for example, a boss summoning skeletons. The skeletons are the trash. But frankly, just having in-between trash between fights, I mean, sometimes it can be cool, but I want fights to have some sort of hook to them. And Flee Mortals obviously helps a lot with this, but even Flee Mortals, like, if I'm putting my party against a dozen zombies in between every encounter, that's going to get really annoying really, really fast. Flee Mortals are not. So, yeah, encounter to encounter. In this dungeon, there were 2 encounters only. It was a relatively small dungeon. I didn't want to overload my party, especially since this was a really packed session with a lot of content. So I decided to keep it to 2 encounters, and I think that's okay. I think a lot of D&D focuses on, like, exhausting your players, and I don't love that. I like making my players, like, prioritize their resources and everything, but a lot of the time, I will prefer to give them an extremely difficult, crazy hard fight rather than a bunch of mundane, boring fights that just exhaust their resources because there's like 11 of them. Here, both fights weren't that intense. The first fight was with a group of Seokoi, 3 ambushers, and 1 artillery. Now, these are roles in the Flee Mortals book. Ambushers are self-explanatory. Artillery are ranged units that affect the party usually with some kind of debuff or with some kind of AoE effect. Basically, these guys are not super powerful by any means, but they do have mechanics. Seokoi focus around hide mechanics. Essentially, if they, you know, have their bonus action, they can hop away and take the hide action. I think that this is an okay mechanic. I liked it. Seokoi also have access to a poison ability. When they are hit, they poison you. They deal poison damage. And again, very basic, but it works. I kept on forgetting to use the hide. That's something that I kind of mess up a lot with Flee Mortals. Some of the abilities I will always remember. Like, for example, the Null Death Frenzy is something I'll always remember to use. But the Seokoi Hop and Hide is not something I use all that often, especially since it can be kind of a buzzkill having all the enemies just hop away and take the hide action, you know. I had it work in a way where they essentially rolled stealth against the party's passive perception, and that was that. In this fight, this was one of the times where I allowed my party to control an NPC. In this case, Marin Luzada, a woman with a glaive and some runestones. She essentially is a skirmisher. She can dash around the battlefield and hit things, and I let my party control her. My ally system is something that I based off of Flee Mortals' retainer system. I didn't love the retainer system. I thought the retainers were really weak, and they're supposed to be really weak. That's their purpose. But for me, when my party takes control of an ally, I want her to be decently powerful, not super powerful by any means, but I'm not worried about her feeling like a DMPC because the party are controlling her. I'm not. The reason I'm not, by the way, is because I hate controlling NPCs. I genuinely don't like it. I have enough going on with the combats, controlling the enemies. I don't want to think about controlling an ally as well, so I give her to the party instead. And I essentially just have them go, you know, I want controller this time, and then I give her stat block to them, and then we go on. So, yeah, it's really fun to give my party access to this ally. When I was designing her, I made sure that she was decently strong, not, like, exorbitantly stronger than the party, but I also made sure that she was simple to control. Player characters have a lot going on, and I hate it. Seriously. I really hate it when a friendly NPC is a player character and uses player character stats, because dude, what are half of those materials even for? Like, what are they doing there? Most NPCs do not need player character stuff. In fact, I would argue that almost all NPCs, the vast, vast, vast majority, do not need player character materials. Pare that stuff down, you know? So Marin essentially has 2 attacks. She has her glaive and her slingshot, and then she has a series of abilities. 2 abilities are currently unlocked. She'll unlock more as the party level up. The first is just a modification to her glaive attack, where she dashes 30 feet without provoking attack of opportunity. She can use that 3 times per day. And the other ability is a simple 1d8 heal that gives you a shield that explodes when an enemy takes away those temporary hit points, dealing damage equal to the amount of temporary hit points you lost. Both abilities can be used 3 times per day, and that's it. She has 4 things. Simple enough for a player character to take control of, not much for them to read through. Those are powerful abilities. They're not, you know, anything to scoff at. You know, a decent heal and defense mechanism, as well as a dash ability to get her out of tight situations, or to get her into combat to help a player character out that's in trouble. But yeah, these are simple mechanics I think really make Marin into a strong, but at the same time easy to understand ally for the party to take control of. Another big benefit of taking control of a NPC is that the party really like that NPC. Like, seriously, Marin has been in the campaign for only a few sessions, and my party already love her and do everything they can to keep her alive. So, 2 really nice benefits. But anyway, she participated in this combat, which made the combat a lot easier because obviously there's a 6th person now. The next combat was against an amalgamation of souls that was centered inside of this strange alien robotic device. This fight was disappointing. This fight was not good. I think it was a combination of things. I think this is one of Flea Immortal's weaker stat blocks, and this is one of those times where I would usually make the stat sheet myself. And for the precursor faction for these robots, I did have stat blocks in mind from Flea Immortals, but they are way too high challenge rating, and they would have crushed the party, and I don't want that. This was a CR4 monster, which is appropriate. This is a level 4 group, but keep in mind, there are 6 of them, 5 player characters, 1 NPC they are in control of, not anything to slouch at. And, you know, while they're not at full capacity, because they did just fight those Seokoi frog people, they are still in a really good spot. So this willow tree thing is not too much of a threat to them. They downed it in 1.5 rounds, so it only got 1 turn, which was crazy. I do think it is a shame, and maybe in another life I would have buffed it up, but frankly I didn't have time to buff up the stat block, or better yet, to make one myself. I do that a lot these days, but I didn't do that here, and I think that that's okay. The Willow was not any sort of final boss. I think it's just a shame because the party really liked the way it looked. I pulled art from this guy who works a lot on the Diablo franchise, and it was absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous. And unfortunately, even though my party really liked the art, they kept on saying how cool it looks. It did die really quickly, but who knows? Maybe I can throw another Weeping Willow at them, maybe a couple of them at the same time to really challenge my players. The reason why I didn't buff it also is because I used that in a short mini campaign, and it kicked the party's butts like bad. But it's important to keep in mind that party was level 3, and there were less of them, so obviously it's different. I keep on forgetting, like, the amount of players your party has absolutely matters. And when you're in a dungeon, you really need to keep that in mind, because a dungeon is not just one encounter, it's a series of them, and you need to balance that around not only how many fights your players are going to be fighting, but also how many players are fighting in those fights in the first place. So yeah, there you go. Those are my dungeon tips I pulled out of the session. Aside from that, there was some role-playing that happened. They role-played with the pirates to bargain with them. And I regret splitting the party here. I split the party, had half of them bargain with the pirates, and had half of them talk to this mermaid. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. I should have had all the party bargaining with the pirates, because I noticed that the people who weren't with the pirates were very frustrated that, like, oh, you're forgetting about this thing or this thing or this thing, but they couldn't do that. They can't say anything because it's metagaming, and yeah. I shouldn't force the party to split like that. Like, never split the party is a thing that a lot of people say, but sometimes DMs will, like, kind of incidentally, accidentally do that. And that's what I did here. Not exactly the best GMing move, but, you know, what's done is done. That's the only really... It wasn't a weak part of the session. It's just not as good as it could have been. Overall, though, a strong session with, I hope, some good lessons about how to do a proper dungeon crawl. I'll probably do another one of these when I do a bigger dungeon crawl. This dungeon ended up being just 2 rooms. Hopefully, in the future, we'll have a dungeon with much more extensive mechanics. But yeah, there you go. That is going to be the end of Campaign Diary. I think it's time to move on to Thing of the Week. Hit the thing. This week, my Thing of the Week are Mooring Mark comics, Owl House comics. So not a few months ago, like August, mid-August, late July, I started watching The Owl House, and it was an incredible experience. And, usually when I watch a show, I watch it, and then, the buzz, catches on, and then it wears off after a few months, and it continues to stay with me. I often buy, merchandise stuff for the things that I really love, and sometimes integrate it into my D&D game, but usually, it relegates itself to the mind of nostalgia. But quickly, I realize that there is a person, a hero, a creator, who makes Owl House comics somehow every day. Every day, this guy called Mooring Mark releases a new Owl House comic on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, Tumblr, everything. And they are so good. They're way better than they have any right to be. First and foremost, the art is really, really good. Like, it's not rough or anything. It's fully illustrated, full color. It's really nice. It's really wonderful to just wake up every morning and just see, oh, new comic to read. And then boom, it's there. And it's amazing. It's just such a great feeling. But on top of that, the reason why I love these so much is because the stories in these comics are good. Whether they be wholesome, funny, cute, sometimes sad. There's so many of them, and they're so good. At this point, the guy has made 800 plus comics or something like that, and every single one of them, almost every single one of them, is of quality. There's only 2 that I have disliked, and that's it. There are hundreds of them, and only 2 of them didn't really vibe with me. That speaks to the quality of how good these are. Recently, the reason they're my thing of the week right now, even though I've been reading them for the past, month or two, is because I really, really got into the most recent ones. He's released some comics about Lumity, which is obviously the signature Owl House relationship, and it's really good to see that. He's varied it up by writing comics about other characters and some original characters, which I think is really cool. I usually don't vibe with original characters, but in this case, they're actually good, so I don't really care. And on top of that, just in general, the characters and the comics have just been so fun to read about. They've been good for a while, but for a long time I was reading his backlog, and now I'm just reading them as they come out, and every day, like I said, I wake up and there's a new comic, and it's just such a good feeling. My personal favorites are Forced Breakup, a 3-parter involving Luce and Amity, the signature couple. And my other favorite would be Promise, which is Amity with her future daughter, which is another wonderful comic. I was actually reading it in the video. Somebody caught it in the comments, and whoever that was, you're a hero. But yeah, Mooring Mark, Owl House Comics, definitely my, not just thing of the week, but the thing of a long time from now, because I think I'm going to be enjoying these for a really long time. I'm really grateful that this creator has been creating such amazing content for a show that is so awesome. A community that is so supportive. Seriously, it's really cool to see a community unite around a creator like this and, really support them. And so, yeah, if you haven't checked out Mooring Mark Comics, if you're an Owl House fan, go read these. They're so freaking good. If you're on the Owl House subreddit, they're always going to be on the top. And I recommend following this guy on Instagram because he always publishes there, and it's just really convenient to scroll through them. So, yeah, I've got this whole collection of Owl House comics on my Instagram saved. Seriously, I haven't used Instagram in a long time, but this guy is the only reason. But yeah, there you go. That's my thing of the week. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Tavern Adjacent. If you guys did, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our RPG Horror Stories series, where we cover the best and worst of Dungeons & Dragons. You guys have been showing us so much support on the show recently. So, if you haven't seen our latest episodes, they're linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment to buy or not to buy to let me know at the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.